a sculptor living in Redwood City, California. Ever since I was a boy, I loved creating and working with my hands. As a young man, I built my own home in rural Massachusetts entirely by hand. While there, I lived a sustainable, off-the-grid lifestyle without electricity or running water. During this time, I also worked as a stained glass artisan, a potter, a fine art photographer, a freelance writer, and a cabinet maker. Then, at the age of 37, I decided to follow a long-held interest and entered Stanford grad school to study film. After graduation, I started my own small production company and wrote, directed, and produced films and videos for the next 25 years. As I began easing into retirement, I had a great desire to try my hand at sculpture, which had long been my favorite visual medium. I well remember the first sculpture I made. As I worked, I felt like a small boy again, simply playing with the materials for the pure joy of it. The complete submersion into the work and the mindlessness I felt at the time remain with me to this day. I am fortunate in that I have the time and the retirement income to sustain me in this practice. If other people like my work, that's great. And if they don't, that's fine also. It's the process of creation that so attracts me. People often ask me where I get my inspiration or ideas from. And that's a hard question for me to answer, since most of my concepts generally come to me out of thin air. It's not as though I can sit down and force an idea for a sculpture into my consciousness. The initial germ for an idea just suddenly appears. Then my conscious mind takes over to refine the concept. I've long been interested in archaeology, myths, the archetypal, and the numinous, and these interests often inform many of the pieces I create. When creating abstract pieces, I usually begin by playing with materials and shapes. I combine these, alter them, and juxtapose them into different arrangements, typically with no final result in mind. Then, when the piece feels right, when it speaks to me, I consider it finished. With figurative work, I do have an idea in mind before I begin, but since I usually create without the use of a model or photographs, the details of the face and body again arise spontaneously. However, whether it's figurative or abstract, I find that I combine a sense of play and exploration with a critical observational view. I merely begin by playing with the material and enjoying myself in the process. Then, at some point, I stand back with my critical mind and examine the work on a more intellectual level, looking at form, negative space versus positive space, mass, volume, contrast, repetition, color, and all of the other elements that go into a work of art. In the end, it's a combination of subconscious and conscious processes that create the final piece. When I begin a new piece, whether it be figurative or abstract, I usually don't have a message or emotion in mind that I'm trying to convey. However, that doesn't mean that my works don't contain a message or don't bring about an emotional response to the viewer. After I've finished a piece, or more typically a series of pieces, I'll come to realize what these pieces represent for me. It's a way for the inner emotions and thoughts that are stirring in my subconscious to rise to the level of my conscious mind. It's a great way for me to learn about myself. In fact, I've always believed that sculpture, and art in general, is one of the best therapies going. And in today's fast-paced and high-tech world, I feel that this is more important than ever. It's also interesting to note that viewers often are emotionally connected to the work or find meanings in the work which I, personally, was not originally aware. I think this is fantastic. At times, these other thoughts often resonate within me and give me further insight into my own self. At other times, they don't. But nevertheless, I'm glad that the sculpture was a conduit for eliciting these emotions in others. Since I love to play and experiment with materials and ideas, this leads me to be a rather eclectic sculptor. At any one time, I'm working on at least one or two different series and from 10 to 20 separate sculptures. Generally, I move away from one of these works in progress when I feel that all of the creative exploration has been completed, when I've worked out all of the problems and the work is satisfying to me. All that's left is to put on the finishing touches. Of course, for some works, having them sit untouched for a length of time gives me a new perspective once I go back to them. Sometimes I'll have an answer for a creative problem that was never solved. Other times I'll have a better and more satisfying solution to an issue that I thought was resolved. In either case, letting a piece sit for any length of time only helps the process. Recently, I've come to the realization that for me, a work is often done before it's completed. When I say done, I mean that I can look at the incomplete piece and feel good about it. I've reached a point of personal, creative satisfaction. From this point on, working on the piece is still enjoyable, but not as much as when the intense creative juices were flowing. To complete the piece may still involve some problem solving and creativity, but for the most part, the issues involved, what type of finish will the piece receive, how shall I mount it, etc., are already decided. What remains is only to execute the decisions. One series that I'm currently working on is called It's About Time. I began this eclectic series to explore my befuddlement and fascination with the concept of time. I also wanted to portray the changes and dissolution that are the result of the passing years. Sculptures in the series are of two types. The first group consists of self-portraits based upon the idea of time, such as this piece, I'll Never Understand Time, which juxtaposes a baby's body based on an actual photo of me as an infant with my current head. Other works in the series, like As Sure as Death and Taxes, incorporate materials from my daily life to convey my incomprehension of time and provide an iconic image that will anchor me to a given time frame. This particular piece consists of tax forms and returns from the year of my retirement combined with a wooden coffin. Another piece in the series, Lisa's Pandemic Birthday, is made from a cement casting of the crumpled plastic box that held my wife's birthday cake from the pandemic year of 2020 and the blown-out candles from the cake itself. It's About Time is my most recent series and includes both abstract and figurative works. My first series, which I began over a decade ago, is called Artifacts from a Former World. This series is composed entirely of abstract pieces and originally arose from my interest in archaeology, archetypal images, and the collective unconscious. The sculptures of Artifacts from a Former World are both evocative and mysterious, familiar yet unknown. They represent ancient forms that are the remnants of a long-forgotten culture. I generally create these pieces in a very spontaneous manner, interacting with materials and often letting them dictate the direction to take. It is only upon completion that the meaning presents itself. Altar Offering is one of the pieces in the series. This work represents the remains of a small altar, perhaps used for a lesser god. It is made of acid-stained cement, one of my favorite mediums, and copper. Another work is Unknown Ritual Object RS-458. In this piece, a golden object, whose ritualistic purpose is lost to time, rises upon a copper column overlooking a rock outcropping. It is made of acid-stained cement, copper, bronze leaf, rock, and wood. Burning Sun depicts the death throes of a sun as it burns out over a decaying world. Yet a small green organic form gives hope for renewal and continued survival. The main body of the sculpture is of highly polished acid-stained cement, which is waxed to a deep luster. Bronze leaf, copper, and wood constitute the other materials used. I create most of my sculptures in one of two home studios. I've converted my one-car garage into a small indoor studio, and I have a larger studio in the backyard, which I use when the weather is nice. Luckily, since I live in Northern California, this is most of the year. I also supplement these home studio spaces with a larger studio at a local college where I volunteer to work with the students. The school also has a small foundry, which is where I pour my bronze and aluminum pieces. It's been a pleasure sharing my information with you. If you have any questions or would like to see more of my work, please visit my website at www.danwoodard.com and drop me a line. Thank you. As you can see, the piece consists of the body of a baby along with the head of an older man. And Stephen, if you could, just for a second, put me on speaker view. Thank you. And this is a photo of myself as a baby that I used for the image of the piece, the body of the piece, and then it's combined with the head of me in my present age, that of an old man, and this was the photo I used as a reference to make the sculpture.
The best ceramic artists in California are strutting their stuff. It's the state championship for clay artisans. 40 different works of clay art, all made by hand. My vote for the People's Choice Award was this Thinking Bearded Man by Dan Woodard. Terracotta with rusted iron coating. Covering all finer things clay, Walt Gray, ABC 10 News.
Good morning. You know, I've been having a good time checking out some of these pieces of artwork. Take a look around. We showed you a few in the 6 o'clock hour, and now we want to show you a few things, including this piece that immediately, Jan, when I walked in, I go, oh, how cool. It's bronze. It is not. Now, Jan, you're the curator for this awesome show. Really quick before we talk about exactly what folks could expect, what are we seeing here?
Yeah, this is a piece by Dan Woodard from Redwood, California, and this is a piece that is made of terracotta clay. And he actually does also work in bronze, so it's not surprising that he has clay works as well that simulate bronze.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool. And if you actually, it's called Women Brushing Teeth, but if you take a look, it's actually two different pieces, which you were very candid and direct. You said it doesn't come off. I can't take the arm off and pull it into two pieces.